I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 224 of the podcast. Here at Rochester Rising, we have a mission to tell the stories of all types of entrepreneurship taking place in Rochester, Minnesota, including the stories of new and established entrepreneurs. We take the time to talk about how and why these entrepreneurs are growing their business and what keeps them growing their startups and established businesses in the community. A brand new podcast comes out every Wednesday, and on Thursday each week we follow up with a short article based on the podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you like to listen in to podcast content, including on our website at rochesterrising.org, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. And you can find our articles and many other stories about entrepreneurs and small business development taking place in Rochester, Minnesota, on our website at rochesterrising.org. Thanks so much for deciding to spend some time with us today. Rochester Rising is the storytelling arm of Collider, which is a Rochester-based nonprofit that activates, connects, and empowers early-stage entrepreneurs within the community. You can learn more about Collider and what this organization does for entrepreneurs on our website at collider.mn. So today on the podcast, I got the opportunity to talk over Zoom with owner and president of Schad Tracy Signs, Jeff Schuppe. Schad Tracy Signs is the commercial sign company that's been in operation for over 40 years and builds and manufactures all of its signs in Oronoco, Minnesota. Jeff purchased Schad Tracy Signs in 2018. Today on the show, we talk with Jeff more about his long history with entrepreneurship, including his very entrepreneurial family, what it was like to purchase a long-standing business, and the value he gets from being a business owner, and much more on the podcast today. So we have a great conversation to share with you with Jeff Schuppe. So we'll jump right into the podcast with Jeff, owner and president of Schad Tracy Signs. All right. So yeah, Jeff, thanks so much for being here today, connecting over Zoom on this not so glorious spring day, I would say, but typical of Minnesota spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to be here.
So I wanted to start out learning a little bit about you and your background. So what kind of makes you, and what are some of your favorite things to do outside of your work life?
Sure. Well, I guess introduction of me, I'm Jeff Schuppe, and I am the owner and president of Schad Tracy Signs. Our manufacturing is based in Oronoco, Minnesota, just north of Rochester. And we also have a sales and install service office out of Burnsville, Minnesota. And I bought the company about 2.5 years ago, roughly. October of 2018 is when I started. I live in the Twin Cities. I live in Inver Grove Heights, kind of right by the Coke refinery there, right off of Highway 52. We're not in the blast zone, as they call it, but we're very near there. So my commute, I probably spend, call it 80 to 90% of my time in Oronoco and surrounding areas. And then the other percentage up in the Twin Cities, kind of working with that office. I don't know. I've got a couple of kids. They're teenagers. One's a freshman in high school. One's a seventh grader in the Rosemont School District. And wife who works for Thrivent Financial and has been there for 17 years. We've been married, I don't know how long it's been, 18 years, I guess now. Passion, I guess, is I really have a passion for entrepreneurship. My mom owned her own business with two of her brothers, and she's recently retired, and my cousin bought the business from them, so he took it over. My sister owns a restaurant and a motel. I guess they're kind of connected, kind of bread and breakfast like, but two separate type things up on Madeline Island in Lake Superior in Wisconsin. My brother used to own his own business. He had a logging type company. My father-in-law owns his own business. He's got a gear company, a custom gear company up in the Twin Cities. And then a lot of people I hang out with own businesses and whatnot that I associate with. So I have a real passion about talking about entrepreneurship, helping people in any way, telling my story, really, anything to do with it. I love it. I think it's a great path for people. It's absolutely not easy, but there are a ton of resources like your podcast here, and Collider, generally speaking, that can assist people. I just only hope to, help contribute.
So you definitely come from a family of entrepreneurs. And I wanted to kind of ask you about that before we moved on, because I find with a lot of entrepreneurs, like conversations with family, especially family that's not entrepreneurial, can be very difficult. Just talking about the risk, not that people not running a business have to understand risk, but just providing that support. And I find that it's really hard with people who aren't business owners or aren't entrepreneurs to understand the risk and be comfortable with that and be able to support the entrepreneur. So how does family play into small business for you and what you're doing?
I think probably the biggest thing is people, generally speaking, I think put entrepreneurs on a pedestal from, you could own a small restaurant and some people might think, ooh, they own this restaurant. They have to have a lot of money, or they have to, they can do whatever they want financially because they own a business. And I think growing up in it and seeing, my parents raised four kids, and I never knew this growing up, but basically every dollar that they had, they invested in us. We played every sport. We never had a problem, finding new hockey equipment or signing up for whatever we wanted to try next. We traveled to places all the time. I never saw the struggle relevant to it. It was just, we did what we did. But now talking with them, every single dollar that they had that was extra, that wasn't feeding a family of four and providing shelter, went to us in our activities, so they really invested in us as kids. But we didn't live a glamorous life. We didn't take vacations. We didn't, drive super fancy cars. None of it. It was just regular everyday life that we went through. It's just, instead of my mom, my dad had a regular job where he worked for different schools and things like that as an IT manager. But they didn't see they didn't treat entrepreneurism as a piggy bank type of a thing. They treated it as, this is my job, and I'm no different than anybody else that's not the owner of the business. It's just I might have a couple more responsibilities relevant to other people's jobs because I, have to keep this thing going so that other people can be employed as well. So I see that a lot with entrepreneurs is, the ones that see it as that they're chasing the glamour or they're chasing the money type of a thing, they always seem to struggle because that's the only thing that they're chasing. If it's something where you're just simply seeing it as a responsibility to your family to do well within your job, you kind of wear two hats, right? You're, like I said, I'm the president, so that's my day job, but I'm also the owner. That's a different job. Those are two jobs that I have. And the people that I see that do that, including my family that I had mentioned previously, they then they thrive and they build because they don't suck everything out of the company in order to live the lifestyle that they want. You're a president and you have to do a good job being president, but you're also an owner, and you employ all of those people and you help their families, with getting health insurance and thriving and growing and getting a better wage and, having autonomy and personal growth, as well as supporting them having a mortgage and raise kids and go on vacations and things like that. So it is a responsibility, but I think it's through the lens. It can be through the lens of, if you really just perform good at your job, you can perform good at your job working for somebody else, or you can perform good at your job working for yourself as an owner as well.
So we wanted to talk about Schad Tracy Signs. So for people not familiar with it, and I don't know how you're not, because you have so many signs that you've done here in Rochester, but perhaps people don't know where they come from. What is Schad Tracy Signs for people not familiar with it? What services do you provide?
Sure. So Schad Tracy Signs was developed. It started in 1979. It was born in Oronoco, Minnesota. I think in the building that we were, or if not shortly thereafter, into the building that we're in currently, still to this day. Brad Tracy and Connie Schad and actually Connie's husband, Mike Schad, were the three owners inside of the company, and they owned it up until 2018. And the two active owners post probably 1990-ish, Brad and Connie kind of, they were the ones to continue on. And then Mike still was an owner, but he went on to do other things. Basically, they started back in the day of painting signs, so you had to paint on the side of a building or paint on some sort of a wood panel or, soon after that, plastic panels or aluminum panels, and then you hung up signs. And then neon came along and they really invested heavily in getting neon up and running. And actually the room that I'm in right now, which is now my office, used to be the old neon room. So they would have gas pumped into it. And, it's where you kind of do glass bending and I guess not really blowing, but then you fill the tubes and, depending on the amount of mercury is in it, that creates the light that's inside of it. But they were heavily vested in producing neon signage for a lot of people in kind of the southeast Minnesota at that time. And then they expanded into a sales office in Burnsville. So then we started doing a lot of jobs in the Twin Cities. And then over time, developing more and more solutions for lighting. Then you went into fluorescent lighting. So if you look at I'm trying to think of ones that we redid recently. When we built these a big light cabinet, it had all these, fluorescent tubes in it, no different than fluorescent lighting when you go into a retail space where the overhead lighting is fluorescence, or it used to be. They built those all out. Well, then come the 2000s, they ended up starting to retrofit a lot of those into LED type lighting, and then slowly phasing out where they didn't build anything anymore that has fluorescence in it. It's all LED lighting that they did. So and that's probably the 80% of our business still to this day is when you look outside, all of the signage that you see outside that's lit, whether it's on the side of a building or on a big pole that's out front, or a church has, a monument with like brick or stone or things like that. And then they might have like a electronic message center incorporated into it. But it lights up at night, things like that. That's probably the 80% of our business that we do. And the other 20% is like store hours that might be on when you walk into a building and it has their store hours and their name on it, just vinyl stuck to glass. Or if you're at Verizon or a dental office or something like that, and you look behind the reception area and you see either lit up letters or just letters that are adhered to the wall, painted in their logo, things like that. That's kind of more of an interior part. So that's probably a 20% of our business, but majority of it, way back when they started it, was everything outside relevant to branding for companies to be able to attract people on a walk-in or a drive-by type basis. And still to this day, that's probably 80% of our revenue.
So are you primarily working within kind of the Twin Cities, Rochester area, or do you work with a lot of companies outside of that geographic region as well?
Going to the 80-20 rule again, yes, probably 80% of our business is in Southeast Minnesota, where we design it, build it, and then install it. Same with the Twin Cities area, and where we build everything in Oronoco. That's our manufacturing facility, like I said earlier, and then we trailer it up to the Twin Cities market and then install it there. The other 20%, we do have national accounts, so they might be based in the Twin Cities somewhere, and then we will build it in Oronoco, and then we'll ship it to somebody in California or Florida or East Coast or wherever, and then we would contract a sign installer in that area to take our signage and then install it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the 80-20 there. We also do a lot of some of the bigger national brands will do that to us. So they'll have a national manufacturer based out of, North Dakota or something, where they build all signage for Pizza Hut. And then when Pizza Hut's ready to redo everything, they contract people all over the country to install that. So that's a job that we have in-house right now, where we're installing a number of different Pizza Huts in the area, where we're just taking down their old signage and then putting up their new signage. But we don't manufacturing anything at that point. All we're doing is removal and install.
Yeah. So for most of the work that you do, which is working with the business, especially around branding, to make this like outdoors sign, what does your interaction look like with the customer from like the initial conversation to getting that up? Because I imagine there's a lot of interface between like the branding and design team within that organization, or maybe an external branding and design consultant that they've hired. What would someone expect from start to end point for the most common type of work that you do with businesses?
Sure. And that range is obvious. If you're dealing with a small restaurant that's going up in town, they're not going to have a bunch of people, surrounding them and resources to help with that design work or revisions and things like that. So on that level, which is about the most entry level that you can get, we have in-house designers, and then our sign specialists would go out and meet with them. They would say, I want something here, on the front of the building. We also have a tenant panel that might be located in the main monument or pylon that's out by the road, where it has multiple people, inside of that building. And then from there, we take a lot of pictures, take some measurements and things like that. We come back to our design crew. They send us their raw artwork, just for having their logo for printing on, menus or business cards or whatever it may be. We take that and then we render it into the signs and actually put it within the photos that we took for what they could expect and how it would look going forward. And then there's a couple of revisions out of that. No, I don't like this. Or what if we did the inverse color, instead of doing it white, what if everything was black and the background was white, however that goes, sizing. We also have to design within city code, and every city has their own code. So having the longevity of working in this market for 41 years, yes, codes change, but for the most part, we know how big of signage that they can get, and what will be allowed and what won't be allowed. So we design whatever we're going to do in that first presentation back to the customer inside of those designs, so that we don't follow through with the process, go back, submit for a permit, and then the city says, no, it's too big. We don't want to set up the expectation with the customer that we're providing something that's, pie in the sky type thing. So from there, basically they say, yes, follow through with this. Let's move on to giving them a bid, for what the potential cost could be. We provide that. If everything looks good, we move on. They sign a contract for us to do it. We submit for permits with the city to make sure that, we can pull this off. Once we get the permit back, we start production, and we follow through with making the signage in-house. And right towards the end, we talk with the customer to make sure, let's say that they were refacing a building or something, or painting it, making sure the wall is ready. We don't do anything electrical related, so we don't do the final hookup of the sign because we're not licensed electricians. So we have to bring in, either they have an electrician that they already work with, or they can hire one through us of a partner that we have, and then we bring them in so that when we do actually hang up the sign, then they can come in and hook the power up, or create the power on the inside of the building. I mean, there's a number of different ways to go about that. And that's pretty much it. They say, great job, and get our final payment to them. And we go on from there. And then obviously we do a lot around this area. So from a post install perspective, we always have our eyes around town to say, hey, it looks like the lighting is out on whatever, or, a face, this happened. We did Pittsburgh Blue downtown, and we noticed one of the faces on one of the letters was cracked. And it just so happened right after that, this was last year, some snow flew off of the side of the Hilton and crushed two or three of the letters.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So they ended up calling us right at the same time we were going to reach out to them. So we ended up just redoing, all of it kind of at the same time. But the point being, they're investing in this signage to bring people in. We want it to be working for them, as long as it possibly can, to do that. So.
Oh yeah. And it's one of the first things a customer sees, especially, some of these larger businesses with the larger signage. And yeah, even like you said, listings going into a plaza or something, if someone's not listed or is improperly listed or something like that, then, that's an issue for the business and their visibility and their branding. So yeah, so important.
Right.
So you said, Schad Tracy Signs has been around for 40 years. Mm-hmm. You purchased it in 2018. So I want to definitely talk about the purchasing of the business and what that looked like. But prior to purchasing this in 2018, 2.5 years ago, however long that is now, what were you doing before that with your career, with your life? Was it anything related to this, or was this a leap?
The signage industry was, yes, a leap. I was not doing anything related to signage. So it was definitely a leap, but kind of my career in a nutshell is I got my bachelor's degree at University of Wisconsin Stout. And, I didn't really do much with my degree. It was more of a life school, learn how to juggle, work hard, play hard, grow up really fast, go to work, but still go to class, all that type of stuff. Anyways, I made it through. And my first job out of school was I worked for Kodak, a subsidiary of Kodak called Qualex. They did all the overnight photo finishing for Target and Walgreens. And, back in the day when film photography, you'd pull out your film and put it in the envelope and drop it into the box. And then miraculously 2 or 3 days later, it would show up with photos in that same envelope. That all came to us, and that was in Eagan, Minnesota. And I learned a ton. I mean, I was a supervisor right out of school. I was 23 years old. Every person I managed was 50 plus. So I really learned a lot from my managers, the general manager, and my direct manager, and then even my surrounding supervisors, that you got to jump in and learn absolutely everything that they do, from beginning to end, and you have to be able to actually do it so that you can earn the street cred, so to speak, to be able to coach them into performing the work and, kind of get them on your team, so to speak. So for the first 3 months, I really didn't do anything but just jump into learning every single activity throughout that photo finishing process, which was, eye-opening for me, coming from school and learning a production environment overnight at that, matter. I wouldn't wish working overnights on anybody, by the way. But it gets done and people thrive in that environment. But anyways, obviously photography I was there for 5 years, and over the course of that, it was an interesting study in the height of film photography, being as high as it possibly can get, and then digital, and then just taking over and just dive bombing. We went from 52 labs that did this overnight photo finishing throughout the US to right before I left, we were one of 5. So we consolidated a lot of different regions around by us, but because we were logistically made sense to have us where we were, but we had really great, we were really efficient at what we did. So people kept consolidating into us. So that kind of kept our life going for a little while. But while I was there, I kind of dipped my toe in the entrepreneur world a little bit. I had a golf business with a guy that I worked with, where we worked overnights. And then when we got home in the morning, we would work on this golf business for probably, 5-6 hours until we couldn't handle it anymore and had to get a little sleep before we went back in. But it was basically like, they host corporate events, a corporate golf event where you go and then you play 18 holes. And throughout those 18 holes, you might have a longest drive, closest to the pin, all of those contests throughout the thing. We actually took that concept and just moved it onto a driving range. So we would host events where people would just come buy a bucket of balls, and a portion of that bucket of balls we would donate to a charity, and the rest we bought prizes for. And then we actually had people out on the driving range, like monitoring closest to the pin and longest drive and things like that. And it was a pretty fun, cool concept. At the end of the day, we weren't business minded and just didn't know what we were doing and didn't make any money on it. And it was more of a hobby, type experience, but it was good. It was fun. We had a good time doing it. And then once my Kodak days kind of were, they were closing up shop, I had an opportunity to, a guy that people I grew up with back in Southeast Wisconsin, their dad was an original investor in Segway, the, human transporter thing. So me and a different friend of mine from high school were developing a concept for outdoor mobile advertising billboards on the sides of semis. And we were just doing that kind of while he was working full time. And eventually we kind of got this investor guy as a mentor to help us through that business planning process. And once we were done, he basically approached us and said, "Hey, do you guys want to scrap that idea and come work for me and sell Segways?" It was right at the launch of Segway. So we were like, yeah, this sounds amazing. Well, we had to buy our own Segways and then, go basically, tell somebody that they needed this in a market where they didn't even understand what a Segway was. And we basically had to find as many niches as we could, relevant to this. Well, clearly that did not work because Segways are not everywhere. But what we ended up doing about halfway through that year was we combined our mobile outdoor advertising idea and concept with the Segway, and we put like a windshield almost on the front of a Segway, so it almost looked like a stand-up chariot type of a thing. And we ended up selling that branding for street level advertising at events. So we took off pretty fast, formed a business for doing it, and then basically just hopped on those, got graphics on the machines, started making the shields, and bought a bunch more machines, and basically just started going ad agency to ad agency in every single market. We started with Minneapolis, and then we went to Chicago, we went to New York, we went to LA, and we would just hop on the machine, roll into the ad agency, and just say, who wants to talk? We had no appointments or anything. It was awesome. I mean, from a pure sales cold calling type strategy. But the thing is you were entering into something where somebody hadn't seen anything, hadn't seen this. And in ad agencies, they're always whatever's cool, come on in type of a thing. So we really got a lot of open doors in that regard. And we started doing a lot more business with, various ad agencies and things like that. We ended up teaming up with a company out of Kansas City that was doing the same thing. And it turns out, were affiliated with this guy in Canada that was doing the same thing. So we all kind of came together and formed this company. Well, here's a pretty valuable business lesson. Probably 3 or 4 months into it, we realized that the guys in Kansas City were stealing. We would go make all these connections at ad agencies, and they called us and said, hey, do you want to come run an event with us out in New York? It's a 10-day event. You already have 2 of them going on. One's in Philadelphia, and then I can't remember where the other one was, and then New York. So we were going to be gone for like a month, just doing events along the way. And, finally we asked, well, how did you get in touch with that? Oh, it was so-and-so ad agency. They called us and, whatever. And well, it turned out we actually met with them, but they lost our information. So when they looked up on the internet, they called back to the guys in Kansas City. They took it and ran with it without telling us that it was us that made that connection. And per our arrangement, it just didn't work out. Well, come to find out, a whole bunch of them were that way, where they just basically took them on themselves. We drove them to the website, they made an inquiry, and then these guys just took on all the work. So we ended up
took all your leads, basically. Right.
Yeah, they took all the leads. They were paying us basically as people to run the event, and paying our expenses, but not the sales commissions and things that came along with the deal. So a good friend of ours from college is an attorney. So we ended up going to him saying, what can we do here? And we ended up having to file a lawsuit against them and, get out of it. So my business partner continued with the business. I said, I'm out of here. I got a kid coming, my first kid coming. I got to move on and get a regular, paying job type of a thing. So I left there, and this would have been 2007, I believe. And I started working at a packaging company. So, when I say that I'm not close to signage, I really mean, I moved from packaging into buying a sign company. But yeah, I ended up in sales at a packaging distribution company. And at that time, it was just the owner, and then he was managing the salespeople. I mean, just like a lot of owners do, right? You manage a lot of different hats. but he slowly then built, and I was the first he had sales managers for hire prior to me, but I was the first full-time sales manager. And then I added on marketing, kind of over the years. And then we ended up buying a business, which I learned a lot from an acquisition perspective relevant to how it all goes. But I really, throughout the course of 13 years, basically of working there. So that wouldn't have been 2007, right? That math doesn't add up. It was 2005.
Okay.
Yeah, 5. So I worked there for almost 13 years, and the owner really took me under his wing, and I learned, everything about operations as much as I could, about sales. I made a marketing team, but all the financials, I sat on the leadership team, and really he was very transparent in the way he ran his business, and I learned a lot about financing and culture and you name it with inside of a business. I mean, I was really exposed to basically everything. And yeah, I mean, eventually in 2017 or 2018, I was just kind of burnt out. I was burnt out on the industry. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up hiring a career coach and really took a lot of assessments relevant to what gives me energy, what I really run to and what I run away from, what I'm inherently good at, what I'm really not good at. And then eventually I just didn't want to I didn't want to look for my next thing, whether that be working for someone else in a different career or buying a business. I didn't want to do it while I was there. I didn't feel like it was like I should be doing that while I was there. So I ended up just resigning, and in early May of 2005 or 2018, I'm sorry. And then I basically made my full-time job looking for what I was going to do next. And I ended up, I had the two paths. I was going to look for something. My assessments came back as basically saying strategy was really my focus and what my kind of DNA was all about. Or I was going to go buy a business. So I pursued both of those paths fairly equally for about maybe 3 weeks. And eventually, as I started, really going down that business path route, it became pretty clear that this is 100% what I want to do. So I ended up kind of subsiding, looking for a job. But yeah, I mean, there's no playbook on that, right? When you come from a career to, how do I even buy a business? What even happens? Which I'm sure is, leading into how it all transpired.
Yeah, no, exactly. I know we talked about this a little bit in passing, but I do hear a lot of questions about, how do you purchase a business? What does that look like? So you talked about how you got originally interested in figuring out this was something that you wanted to do personally. How do you find available businesses? What does that transaction look like? Like, can you do it yourself as an individual? Do you need a team of professionals? Imagine there's a lot of legal and other entities involved. Like, what did that look like for you in the purchase of Schad Tracy Signs?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of figuring it out on the fly. But thankfully, in the manner that I left my past company, I still maintained the relationship with that owner. And we still, to this day, talk and share ideas and are friendly. And I still have a lot of friends inside of his business that still work there. And we actually do business with them now, whereas they didn't in the past. But reaching out to basically as many people in my life that were anywhere close to entrepreneurship, was a first start. And I was kind of shocked and blown away at the amount of entrepreneurs that I knew, and maybe didn't even know personally. I just knew of them, or I got referred to them by someone I did know, that are willing to have coffee with you, have a beer, have lunch, whatever it is. They all, if someone has a passion or an interest in entrepreneurship, I would highly, highly encourage people to just reach out to any business owner that they know and just start asking questions. Just be curious, be open, be vulnerable, to know what you have in your skill set and what you don't, what you have to seek out from other sources. Because entrepreneurs, I feel anyways, even now, they love sharing with people that are interested in entrepreneurship, and it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to pay someone to do it. If you buy them a cup of coffee, or buy them lunch or a beer, or anything at all, or have a Zoom meeting like this, I've had plenty of these, to just talk, and ask questions. And that was a major step for me. So I just started asking people. I knew a banker, a personal friend of mine that was a business banker, and I didn't really know what that meant prior to, thinking of this angle. And I said, hey, how do I go about it? How do I know what I can afford for a business if I even come across one? How do I, what are avenues for helping finance it? A lot of real basic questions. And he had a ton of answers. And he introduced me to, it was my friend works at Wells Fargo. He introduced me to an SBA lender at Wells Fargo. And same thing, I sat down with him for a cup of coffee and said, how does this look? What do I have to do to pursue this process? And he gave me a whole bunch of different avenues. One of them was, he said, there's basically no harm in just starting to meet with business brokers. So no different than a real estate agent. I'm sure they wouldn't like to hear that, but they buy and sell businesses, and there's a lot of them, and they are all over the place. So he introduced me to 4 or 5 of them that he does SBA deals with, or he has done over time. And I would just call them and start meeting with them. And eventually, maybe after the first couple, I was, they keep saying, what's your criteria, or how much can you afford? Well, I didn't have any of that information. So I basically just came back and said, man, I would really, I know what I don't want, and I know what I do want, so then I just started making lists of different things, because everything's a business, right? If you want to run a landscaping company, or a liquor store, or, a sign company. I mean, there's so many different kinds of businesses out there that when you really start digging in, they're all out there, so you can really find, what you want, but developing that criteria of kind of what you want, and then really what you don't want, really helps when you meet with those brokers, because you're telling them, basically, don't even call me on this type of stuff, but if something comes up where it's in this realm, go for it. So they turned me on to a website, which I'm kind of surprised at how quickly, after a business is listed, how quickly it gets on there, because it's like the central depository for businesses that are for sale. It's called bizbuy.com. And you can set up different criteria inside of there. So, not to exceed this price for a listing price, or this type of industry, or this, geographic location. You can put everything in there, and then basically every day you get emails on all the new listings of that business, of the businesses that are within that criteria. So I did that. But realistically for me, once I got that criteria, I became really laser focused on excluding things that didn't really mean anything to me. But I networked, the very first person I networked with, his name is Jacob Peterson. He's actually in this market. He's got a cool co-working contract kitchen place that he just opened called Pico up in Pine Island. And he's a business broker for Murphy Business. He's the original person I met with that showed me Schad Tracy. So that was the very first one that I looked at. Well, since right after that, I met with a number of the other brokers just to see what else was listed. So I probably looked at 15 to 20 other different businesses. And when I say look at a business, basically what that means is a broker will send you an NDA. So you have to sign something basically saying you're not going to tell anyone that this business is for sale. You're not going to contact anyone else that's there. You can't share financials. Anything that they send to you, you're locked down. This is a secret, so to speak. And then from there, they send you like a marketing packet, which is kind of a high level. Here's the revenue for the last 3 years. Here's the niche that they're in. Here's the growth expectation that they have. Here's all the amount of employees, kind of, it's a marketing packet, but there's a little bit of detail as well. And then they can send you financials inside of there. So profit and loss statements, balance sheets, tax returns, things like that. And that's where it really becomes real from a, wow, I can, going back to what I said earlier, if I'm president of this company, here's what I'm taking over and, in running this financial responsibility, in these people and, what it is and the sales and, all of it. And then my ownership hat is, okay, here's what it is now. And here's what it makes, from a net profit perspective, or me as an owner and seller discretionary earnings. How can I grow it? How can I put numbers together to it to make it grow? Or is it lifestyle sustaining? In other words, if I'm buying a job, if I'm buying a president's job, is there enough money in that bottom line to pay me as a job? Because a lot of times when entrepreneurs are, especially in a startup situation, you don't pay yourself for, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Until you really get into it. Whereas this is the advantage in buying a job is there's already all that stuff built in there. There's revenue built in there. There's infrastructure, there's people, there's a market, there's potential customers. So can I from day one, as soon as I take over, can I start taking a wage from that company as a job? And that was a key thing for me to overcome, relevant to this, because I wanted that, from the very beginning. So if a company was not profitable enough to make the salary that I wanted to make, I would just exclude it. I would just go right past it. But if there was enough in there to pay me what I wanted to make from a salary perspective and extra money in there, based on the profits, and I could still afford to buy it, that meant not only can I pay myself, but I have this extra money that I know I can reinvest in the company in order to modernize it and, fix things and hire people or give people raises or whatever it may be, pursue more marketing or change the website, so that then I can, not only can I get in there comfortably, and if I did absolutely nothing when I get in the door, other than keep the people happy, it should just keep maintaining on its own. So those were really key things, inside when I was setting that criteria, to be able to see where I was going with this whole concept. And I kept coming back to Schad Tracy because it had all of that. It had all of the things that my must-haves, and it had a lot of nice-to-haves if everything worked out properly. And there's a number of intangibles that I didn't really know until I got into the business, that are way beyond what you can put, from a criteria perspective. I mean, and just a lot from a rewarding perspective, and happiness, and future growth opportunity, and all those other things that you just can't anticipate. There's also a lot of challenges that you have no idea when you go from being a corporate employee to being, the owner. There's just a lot of unknowns and things like that as well. But so then basically I moved. I really focused on Schad Tracy. This is it. I'm in. I said, who else do I need on my team? How do I make this happen? Okay, you got to have an attorney that can write up documents. You have to have an SBA lender, or just a traditional lender if you're going to do it that way, or a lot of money, and you could buy it with cash. But you really need kind of. They always talk about the legs of the stool relevant to a business owner. You need an attorney. You need somebody that can do the financing of it. You need an accountant that can help you structure from a tax perspective how you set up your corporations, and then going forward, having tax efficiency as you continue to get into the business. And then you need a banker to help you manage your money and how transactions are set up and things like that. So I got my team and developed a contract to. There's a couple of different ways you can go about it, but basically you draft a letter of intent, which is kind of the general framework of an offer. You present it to the sellers, and it kind of goes back and gets refined. And throughout that process, you probably want to meet each other so that like in the case of Schad Tracy, those owners wanted the legacy to continue. They wanted somebody to come in, keep the people, keep the building, do the same thing, maybe keep the name. I'm not exactly sure. But basically, breathe life into it and continue it. And that's not the case for everybody, right? I mean, sometimes people are just like, I'm done. You can do whatever you want, take it and run. Or a private equity firm would come in and they would, maybe strip a bunch of things out or physically move it or whatever it may be. But the buyer sets that criteria for what type of, or the seller sets that criteria for what type of buyer that they want, as much as I had my own criteria for what I wanted to buy. So, I mean, they interviewed me as much as I interviewed them. And we, turned out that it was a good fit. So ended up negotiating through the some of those terms, and then got to a purchase agreement. And then in the purchasing agreement, that's really where the rubber meets the road to say, okay, you are buying it for this. Here's how you're financing it. It's usually depending on the size of the sale, it's a combination of buyer, some sort of a loan finance, and then SBA requires that you do, or they used to until this COVID period, that seller has to carry a little bit of the financing going forward for a certain term. So they have a vested interest in its success post sale, which makes sense. And then, a lot of details inside of that agreement that you're still agreeing to and negotiating, non-competes so that they don't go start another sign business when they leave, things like that, consulting back to the company. So we close at the end of October. How are you going to help this new owner transition out? There's a lot of details to work out inside of there. So then we finalize that, and then basically it goes to what they call due diligence. So they start providing everything, all types of financials and tax returns and sales documents and contracts and, everything. And as a buyer, it can be really overwhelming because, again, if you haven't done this before, what am I looking for? Am I trying to find something that's off, or that they said that they lied about? or key opportunities where they do something a certain way where you can really post sale, make it go better. There's all kinds of things in there, but again, there are people in that, in the process of due diligence that can help. And I would go back to the entrepreneurs in your life to say, hey, help me look at these financials. Am I missing anything? What are the red flags? What do I need to ask more questions about? Because everybody comes with a different perspective on that, to be able to help people through that process. And that takes, again, depending on the size of the business, a month or two. Meanwhile, your financing is going through its processing and they're asking you for a lot of documentation. And eventually, you work your way towards setting a closing date. Everything's approved. If there's real estate involved in the transaction, there's a lot more details that I won't go into. But it's a whole nother set of things that you have to go to. But there again, if entrepreneurs that have been through buying commercial property, absolutely reach out to them. They can tell you things to look for, things to do and not do. Even SBA people have a lot of contacts and resources that they'll just refer you to. Hey, you're going to have to go through this process. You should just have a phone call with this guy, and just ask type of a thing. Then eventually you set a closing date and move to close and move to transition, transitioning inside of the business. So.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a super interesting and a very nuanced process. But yeah, extremely interesting nonetheless, even just, learning the team that you have to have around you and the value of just talking and sharing what you're trying to do to get advice from others. So I'll wrap up my final question for you. We talked about when you were working with business coach or career coach, I think you said, and you were thinking about pathways, and one was business ownership. You could have chose the other pathway. So what keeps you coming back every day? What keeps you down this path of why do you love owning your own business? What passion, what enjoyment do you get out of this?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. You sometimes don't realize what you have until you're on the other side of it, right? You can't see over the top of the mountain or the hill. It might be great, based on what all your preparation and your data crunching and, meeting with everybody and whatever. And then you get to the other side and, you're executing on it. But a number of things that I was hoping for but I didn't really realize what was there. And I would say first and foremost is when you buy a legacy company, it comes with people, right? And the former owners did an amazing job of retaining people within this company. And the frustration throughout the buy process was I didn't have access to any of them. I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't, basically the fear there is that the seller fears that you're going to tip them off that the company's for sale. They somehow leave and then now you're not going to buy the business. The reality of it is as a buyer, I don't want them to leave either, because I want them to help me, especially moving into an industry that I had no knowledge of. But I actually paid unrefundable access to 2 people inside the company, because I didn't care about interviewing them from a get out of the deal perspective. I interviewed them to get them on my team the day I walked in the door and said, hey, everybody, I'm the new owner, and now they're already with me and we can say, hey, everybody, this guy's all right. He's not going to damage us and he's going to keep us around type of a thing. But that was non-refundable. And I just did it just to try to make an alliance prior to coming into the company. And I'm really thankful I did. Those two people happen to be my managers that I promoted basically right into the door. But the things that I did not, that I'm unbelievably grateful for is the knowledge, the I guess experience, but the passion that they have for the customers of Schad Tracy and doing a quality job to make sure that they're performing to the top of the ability that we possibly can, that sets them apart. And really, I bought the secret sauce, which is the people. I mean, at the end of the day, they're the ones that execute on all of it. I don't make signs. I don't install them. I don't, I know how to do all of it based on my advice I told you that I got from my first job out of school. I submerged myself in this business right out of it, and I know all of it. But they're the ones that do it day in and day out, and the amount of care and pride that they have, even to the point where when I came in, I met with every employee one-on-one, basically starting that first day into the second day. And one of the employees came in and he said, still to this day, I talk about it all the time with him still, is he will, with his kids or maybe his kids and his fiance, they'll load up the car with his mom or grandma and they'll drive around town and he'll point out, yeah, I did that one. And, they'll go grab ice cream or whatever and sit in the parking lot and he'll describe, man, we had to do this challenge, with this thing. And you wouldn't believe how we had to precisely measure the size of the pole that went into the cabinet and, all the technicalities on it. But basically he's driving around town showing off his work of pride that he has and his family to his family, and doing it. And I was like, wow. I mean, that's amazing to me that you take that kind of pride to go home and talk to your family about something positive that you're investing 8 to 10 hours of your day and your life in. And you still take them out and say, all the time I don't spend with you guys, here's what I'm doing. And look at this, piece of art that's hanging up for this brand. That was really eye-opening to me from a people perspective, to have that care, that they have, and to be able to work alongside the people that are here. I mean, it blows my mind every day that they're here and they have this passion for this business. So that was one of the biggest eye openers for me. The other side of it is creativity. I think I always had creativity, kind of in my genes or growing up. But everything we do is custom, 100%. All those signs that are behind me, every one of them is completely custom. They're not like, any of the other signs that we make. So having the ability to create something for somebody's brand that they are super excited about, and then hang on the building to attract people to come in to buy their product or service or something. That was something that I didn't know, prior, the creativity element of it. And I guess lastly, the experience, brokers, generally speaking, get paid by the seller. Their commission is on, whoever's listing the business, that's who would pay their wage, once it closes. And I heard throughout the process, when I was starting to meet with brokers, that process was transactional. That there's not a lot of brokers that really care about you as a buyer. So they just basically want to work towards the deal. Whatever that deal is, they want to work towards it. They're not there for you, all that type of stuff. And I was pleasantly surprised by the experience of working with, like I had mentioned, Jacob Peterson throughout that process, because number one, I never felt like it was one-sided. I felt like he was truly being a bridge builder, leaving somebody's legacy to be able to carry it on to somebody's new passion and legacy. He truly wanted to make a smooth transition in that and have those owners still talk post sale, and not have it be a bad relationship going forward. And now that I'm in it, it's even more clear that the numbers were not wrong. Everything was above board, even if it was things that they're not good at. They were vulnerable. It truly was an experience that I now want to do over and over and over again. I want to acquire more. I want to build. I want to get better at, improving things and modernizing and whatever. But the experience was not, I was half expecting in the back of my mind not to trust the fact that once I actually got in it, that I could pay myself what I wanted to pay myself, or I could give employees raises, shortly in the door, or, fix a roof on the building, or, have that extra money to be able to reinvest. It was all there. I mean, it was a pleasant process. And I think that's a key thing for people that are even considering buying a business, is talk to as many brokers as you possibly can, or people that are, selling their businesses, and select people that you can trust, that are around you and have your best interest in mind. And I would highly recommend getting a broker that fully understands both parties have to be happy. And this is a joint situation of somebody selling and somebody buying, versus once that sale transaction is over, who gives a crap, and, you can just move on. So I was pleasantly surprised at that. And, now that experience has come to fruition, I'm wanting to tell my story about, going from being in an everyday job to being able to buy a business. And I still, I get calls out of the blue, or people reaching out to me on LinkedIn or wherever it may be, saying, I'm considering this. Do you have time to talk? And I'll take as much time as I can and invest in somebody else going through that process. So that was a rewarding part of this, is being able to hopefully give back and give as many people this idea or possibility as I possibly can.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing this. So many excellent nuggets of information and knowledge and processes in there. I learned so much from you today. I'll wrap up by asking you, where is the best place for people to find Schad Tracy Signs, online or in person?
Sure. You can go to our website, which is schadtracy.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you want to connect, like I had said, if you're considering doing this, by all means, hop on there, connect with me, send me a message, and I'll absolutely, get back to you and work with you.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your story. I appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate it as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much to Jeff for sharing this amazing story with us today on the podcast. You can learn more about Schad Tracy Signs through the link in our bio, and be sure to check out our website tomorrow for a short article based on the podcast conversation we had with Jeff today. That's a wrap for us at the podcast. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today. It's a huge help to us if you make sure you're subscribed to the Rochester Rising podcast wherever you like to listen in to podcast. And please consider rating the podcast as well, so that other people can find these stories and learn more about entrepreneurship and business development taking place in Rochester, Minnesota.